by permit.
Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the May 15th, 2018 Post Falls City Council meeting. Real quick, if you haven't voted, you may want to run out and vote because with 6 public hearings, we may not be done before the polls are closed. So hopefully everybody has voted. And again, there are 6 public hearings tonight, which I think is probably a record for City Council. Anybody wishing to speak on any of these, there are forms on the dais. Please fill them out and turn them in to Shannon, our clerk, and we will listen to testimony. Clerk will note that all council members are present. We did have a workshop prior to this meeting and adjourned to start this meeting. I do have a few announcements. The American flag flew at half-staff today in honor of Peace Officers Memorial Day 2018. In 1962, President Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day and the calendar week of May 15th as National Police Week. National Police Week pays special recognition to those law enforcement officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of others. Avista will be doing periodic live tests of the Post Falls North Channel Dam near Camellan Park emergency warning siren from approximately 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Wednesday, May 16th and Thursday, May 17th. Avista is in the process of upgrading the Post Falls North Channel emergency warning and evacuation siren. To optimize the effectiveness and audibility of the siren, Avista will be conducting periodic tests of the various siren tones and public address capabilities. These soundings may last up to 5 minutes in duration and may be broken up into several activations. So I guess the gist of it is it could get loud and it could get noisy, but don't panic, it is a test. City Hall and city business offices will be closed Monday, May 28th in observance of Memorial Day. The annual Memorial Day Remembrance Celebration held at Evergreen Cemetery will be Monday, May 28th at 10 a.m. Join American Legion Post 143 in remembering our fallen heroes. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
There are none.
Are there any declarations of conflict tonight? Seeing none, Warren, would you please present the consent calendar?
Maybe. We get to the right spot on the agenda. Item A is minutes, May 1st, 2018 City Council meeting. Item B, payables April 24th, 2018 through May 7th, 2018. Item C, award of the 2018 asphalt basalt chip seal and fog seal placement contract to Poe Asphalt Paving. Item D, BNSF Railway Pipeline License Agreement for Idaho Veneer Bore. Item E, Plaza 41 Special Use Permit Appeal Reason Decision. Item F, Resolution from the Planning and Zoning Commission to de-annex certain properties from the East Post Falls Urban Renewal District.
Any questions on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Move for approval of the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Shannon, please take the roll.
Thorson?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Malloy?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Borders?
Aye.
Wilhelm?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item begins our public hearings, and as I said earlier, there are 6 tonight. The first is the Prairie Crossing West Comprehensive Plan. And with that, I will open the public hearing. Mr. Manley.
So real quick, the first public hearing is a comprehensive plan. There's actually the first 3. We have a comprehensive plan, a text amendment, and then an annexation. As you've read through your staff report, you probably realize they're somewhat tied to each other. I do want to make note, though, they do have different meanings and different implications and do need to stand on their own. That's why they're parsed out. And the text amendment, when we get to it, would apply to all areas of Post Falls. So, because it would be an available zoning district within Post Falls. So, John Manley, Planning Manager here at the City of Post Falls, here to present the Prairie Crossing West Comprehensive Plan Amendment. The case file for this one is CPA 1, 2018, with the applicant being Brad Marshall of JAB Engineers. He's representing Prairie Crossing West LLC and Prairie Crossing West 2 LLC. So the request is to review and approve an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And as part of this amendment, we're looking at the future land use map. In particular, establishing some commercial zoning up on the north of Highway 41 and some text associated with the designation or the purpose of the commercial element within the comprehensive plan. In reviewing this, we'll look at the comprehensive plan policies as guiding principles on how to determine this. Looking at the location, as stated, it was proposed commercial. This right here you see yellow is currently designated as residential in the comp plan. We have an area that's not currently designated out beyond our city limits. What you see here is an area of city impact. So, and why it comes to play is there's a shared agreement with municipalities. So you have exclusive tiers, shared tiers for each jurisdiction. Our exclusive tier, let me get the mouse to work, is right about this location and terminates just between Prairie and Wyoming. I have reached out to Rathdrum and Hayden to ask for comments for the shared tier to see what issues they may have with the proposed comp plan element. There's none pertaining to the comprehensive plan designation at this time. I didn't receive any concerns back. I sent out for questions and none were stated. I did meet with Connie Kruger with Hayden, and I'll speak to that at the time of the annexation and the text amendment parts where there was maybe some potential elements that I'll bring forward at that time. So currently it's mostly vacant agricultural land. The amount that's residential is 80 acres with the undefined area being about 165. The water provider would be Ross Point, with City of Post Falls providing the sewer. So that kind of covers the map amendment aspect of this. Now looking at the commercial, the purpose statement of it within the future land use, you can see here that it's a minor text amendment being proposed right here where the designation supports zoning for commercial and office uses, public buildings, mixed use zones, or planned unit developments. So this would clarify potential opportunities going forward for that commercial designation. The policies encourage a balance of land uses to help Post Falls remain a desirable, stable, sustainable community. Within the commercial designation, it provides a bunch of different opportunities, either through commercial outright or potentially multifamily through special use or other industrial type activities once this zone is established. Ordinary activities should occur within a walking distance of most residences. So going back to here, odds are you wouldn't get in this proximity a subdivision in this area, like a residential subdivision in close proximity to Highway 41 and Prairie. It'd be tailored off, phased off. So with some sort of mixed zoning or commercial at this eventually down the road, you would allow some measure of independence where people could walk or bike or some other means to get their services rendered. Regulations that encourage the development of suitable scale commercial facilities throughout the community, it would facilitate that. Commercial uses should be considered in areas indicated on the conventional future land use map as suitable for residential, commercial, and mixed use. That's kind of why they're here today, is to get this designation so future land apps could be consistent with what they're proposing. Commercial shopping centers should be encouraged to be located near arterial intersections and high trafficked areas. So with that commercial designation on the comp plan, It would allow for that to be proposed. It wouldn't be inconsistent with being two major arterials. The Highway 41 corridor recognizes the specific needs for being consistent with the Highway 41 corridor plan. Commercial wouldn't be inconsistent with this. When you look at the Highway 41 corridor, it presumed you would have some commercial going up Highway 41, backing into some sort of mixed densities further away from those corridors. You see here a list of agencies that were routed. We did receive a comment from the Kootenai County Fire, neutral, but that the closest fire station would be on the 16th there, with a potential future station on Charville and Prairie. So that's about it for staff's introduction on the
Any questions,
component.
John, at this point?
I have a question, but I don't know exactly where in all of this I should ask that question. And that has to do with the percentage of multifamily residential.
That'd be for the text amendment
Text amendment?
portion of it. Right now, we're just looking at, does designate this commercial as part of a future land use, does there legs on that? You can deal with the zoning and the text at a different time, but we're just dealing with the map.
I
And
thought
then
that's where it was, but I wasn't sure. I thought I'd better ask. So it didn't get passed over and then I'm done.
plus that little text change with that, the definition of commercial for the land use designation.
Thanks, John.
Any other questions, John? Thank you.
Right,
Does
thanks.
Applicant wish to speak on this one? Name for the record, please.
Comp plan. That one right there. How do you move it forward?
Just use that clicker there, go to the right, and then I'll click the next
One
slide.
clicker.
I'll get you your mouses.
It's still, oh, let's see. Perfect. Great. Technical difficulties. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Brad Marshall. I'm with JUB Engineers, 7825 Meadowlark Way in Coeur d'Alene. Again, it's a pleasure to represent the applicants, which is Prairie Crossing LLC. And with me tonight is Philip Worth, who represents the investor group on this project. Philip and the group have been doing business in Post Falls for 17 years, and proud to say they've been a client of mine, or JUB's, for 17 years as well. Good people. We'd like to thank the council for the hearing tonight and giving us your time, your personal time, as well as thank the staff for their help on the application documents. It's been a lengthy road to get to the hearing process. As always, staff has been great to work with. As John mentioned, we actually again have clarified we have three applications tonight. One is the comprehensive plan amendment to commercial. Again, that's the underlying, the foundation of zoning. The next item is the text amendment to create a technology mix zone. It's a new zone for your city, ideally. And the next item beyond that is an annexation, and with annexation comes zoning of that property, and we ideally hope to apply that technology mix zoning with that annexation based on that comprehensive plan amendment. It is a lot, and I'll try to be brief, but bear with me as I move through things. As John mentioned, we're seeking that comp plan amendment of your future land use map from residential to commercial for about 80 acres and a commercial designation for the remaining 165 acres. The property is on the west side of Highway 41 between Prairie Avenue and Hayden Avenue, and a portion of the ownership is already in the city zone CCS commercial. Our client's goal is to develop what's called the Inland Northwest Technology Park. The goal is to develop a business park that can attract technology users, semiconductor manufacturers, advanced processors, data centers, ideally, aerospace industry, basically manufacturing of products and industry inside buildings. The best visualization might be, I'll kind of back up. We often think of Micron in Boise or Intel in the Portland areas. These are the types of industry that we hope to attract to this area. Along with that is supporting services, which would be like commercial services. These would be restaurants, coffee shops, daycare, convenience stores that support the industry on that site. There is no residential planned on this project. We hope to develop the project over the next 20 years. It's a long-term project. As you're aware, the site is on the edge of town. Well, what we thought was the edge of town, I guess. Post Falls is growing. Having been doing business here a long time, lived here a long time, I can remember when Pole Line was the edge of town, and I remember in Coeur d'Alene when Ramsey Road was a 2-lane road. But today things have changed, and exciting changes. Again, this site's just north of Tullamore. Future City Park, which is on the northwest corner of Tullamore. A portion of the site, again, is in the city, zoned CCS commercial. What's unique about this property, and if you look at it today, it looks just like a field on the edge of town, just north of Tullamore, but it does have sewer to the property, it does have water from Ross Point Water, but what was really unique is it had a very large water right on the property, significant water right. And over the course of a year, we worked with the Ross Point Water District to annex that property into the district. They've been great partners, and we transferred that water right to the district, and they will be our provider with a significant water right. Also, what's a little unique is that property can be served with power from Kootenai Electric, Cooperative, or Vista, 2 utility providers that can compete against each other. And what's unique about them is they have some of the lowest utility rates in the country. And we can compete with low utility rates, whether it's water or power, to attract tech users to this property. And the reality is tech users do require a fair amount of power. They require a fair amount of water in their processing and manufacturing of products. So it's a unique site. What's also a little unique is it's just 2 miles away, or 2 miles south of the large 500 kV power lines that cross across the Rafton Prairie, and the natural gas pipelines across the prairie from Canada to California. So we have an opportunity to connect to those and obtain gas and electricity at retail wholesale rates. So it's a tremendous opportunity, strategically located. The property is also bisected by a railroad spur that serves one use. There's a little propane business on Prairie Avenue, and through the Highway 41 reconstruction, that railroad spur will kind of be backed out. And but we're going to back it out and still keep it within the park. So there's an opportunity to capitalize on that railroad spur. Maybe someday we'll be making plane parts and putting them on a railroad and shipping them to Boise, or excuse me, to Boeing. Time will tell. What's also unique is K-Tech, Kootenai Technical Campus, and the North Idaho Career Campus, again, are just in our backyard. So we've got a tremendous facility, a workforce there to develop. And the site is centrally located to, again, workforce, centrally located to Post Falls, Coeur d'Alene, Hayden, Rathdrum. It's at the axis of the prairie. And what a tremendous centrally located piece of property. Again, we hope to attract those types of industries, advanced manufacturers and data centers based on that. Lots of power, affordable rates, efficient rates, which we both have here. What we also have here, and maybe we don't take knowledge of it every day, is we have a very safe environment. We don't have a lot of earthquakes. We don't have a lot of other natural hazards. And that, quite frankly, that's why some of the biggest data centers in the world, in the country, have located in the inland Northwest. Over the last 10 years, they've located along the Columbia River because there's cheap power, inexpensive power, and water. They've also located to a remote area in northeast Oregon called Prineville, Oregon. For those who know, that's the headquarters of Les Schwab Tire. But nonetheless, it is now the headquarters of some massive data centers because they've got ambient air temperatures that are conducive to data centers. They've got real competitive utility rates, and they've been able to attract those data centers to those areas. And that's what we hope to bring to Post Falls, based on the same or similar characteristics. So it's kind of moving forward. There's a lot of land use documents and maps that speak to the comprehensive plan amendment that we're seeking. One is the 2010 Smart Code that went through a large public hearing and vetting process, and that plan designated this property a G2 and a G3 land use designation, which were both mixed-use land use designations that allowed commercial and residential growth in this area. Then comes along what's called the Highway 41 Corridor Plan. It's the planning document that's the foundation of really Highway 41 being reconstructed from today's 2-lane state highway to a 4-lane section that'll look like Highway 95 in a point. It speaks to this property and signals and accesses and so forth. Sewer. When you look at comprehensive plan amendments or annexations, you always look at available services. And again, this particular property shows up in the Rathdrum Prairie Sewer Master Plan, the city sewer master plan. And a reminder is that there's actually sewer to Prairie Avenue now that extends right up Charville. So there's sewer to the property. Over the last course of the year, we've been working with your city staff to develop what we call the Northeast Quadrant Sewer Study. It's a very comprehensive sewer study for really the Highway 41 corridor that extended over to Hutter Road, kind of extended over to Cecil Road. But it developed a kind of a new program of sewer improvements for the corridor and some, quite frankly, some tremendous engineering solutions that will benefit that corridor with a series of lift stations and forest and gravity mains. And that took about a year to do, and we worked collaboratively with your engineering department to get that done, and I think it'll be before you in the near future for acceptance and so forth. Fiber. Fiber is very critical nowadays to attracting these types of industries, and there is actually a large fiber line that runs up Highway 41, extends across Hayden Avenue, and then up to Sandpoint. Through the Highway 41 reconstruction in just 2 years, that fiber line will actually be replaced and enhanced, and a new fiber line will go in, and we hope to tie that into the technology park. So fiber is very critical to this industry. When we think of comprehensive plan amendments or zoning or annexation, is it compatible? And I brought in another example from our nearby city. This is Coeur d'Alene, and this is the Highway 95 corridor. It extends from Hanley to about Prairie Avenue, and they've got a large commercial designation from Hanley to Prairie, extends about half mile west. And that's home to a variety of uses. One is the Parkwood Business Properties, Coeur d'Alene Technical Park. And within that tech park is a variety of office space, some retail uses, and some tech industry. There's Sunshine Mintings in there, and I think it's called Advanced Input Devices. And there's also some retail uses. There's even a little bit of assisted living and that type of use. So if you kind of think about it, for those that have been around a while, that extends from kind of the Heckler building all the way up to Prairie, kind of ties in Coles there too. So there's a mix of uses there. But as you look to that area and you look to the west, it gradually changes from those commercial, kind of light industrial uses into multifamily uses and then the single family uses. So it's a nice transition of compatible land uses. Very similar to what we hope to create along 41 in Prairie. Population, big changes for Post Falls. We all probably have mixed emotions about it, but regardless, there's a lot of planning documents that speak of the growth in Post Falls, and whether or not it's KMPOs or other planning documents. It's my understanding that Post Falls will reach a population of 90 to 100,000 people in the next 20-year planning period. And a lot of that may well be residential growth, but we hope to provide commercial jobs, business park growth, a place where people from Post Falls can work and not commute to Spokane or not to commute to Coeur d'Alene, where we can create a tax base for Post Falls, a commercial tax base for Post Falls. And that's what we hope to develop is the Inland Northwest Technology Park, all business uses, no residential. And that's why we're seeking the comprehensive plan amendment tonight. And of course, the next items will be the technology zone and the annexation. Again, there's a lot of planning documents that speak to this. Your existing comprehensive plan that John spoke of, your SMART code, your Highway 41, your sewer master plans. I want to politely point out that your planning commission had a hearing on this item back in March. They unanimously recommended approval of the comprehensive plan amendment. With that, on behalf of the applicant, I respectfully request approval of the comprehensive plan amendment.
Thank you, Brent. Any questions, Mr. Marshall?
I got it.
Good.
Brad, if everything fell into place in kind of in a perfect world, when would you plan on a start date, or do you have a target date when you'd like to start this project?
We want to get through the what's called the permitting entitlement stage right now, not which involves this process right now, wrap up annexation agreements, and then you kind of move into engineering of infrastructure, which may be this summer and fall, and potentially construction in the spring. Intentionally, the property is not being marketed this time. Not to say that as things pop up, we're reacting to those. It's important to get through the permitting so when somebody comes to knocking on your door, you're ready to help.
Any questions? Thanks, Brent. Anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
I'm assuming there's not going to be any rebuttal of that, so with that, I will close the public hearing. Council, how do you wish to act?
If nobody's going to speak, I'll make a motion.
Go.
Okay, I would move to approve the Prairie Crossing West Comprehensive Plan File Number CPA-001-2018.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Shannon, please take the roll.
Wolf.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next public hearing, Prairie Crossing West Text Amendment. With that, I'll open the public hearing.
So, same applicant as before. File number's changed, as you see there. And here it is, the request to review and approve a requested text amendment within Title 18, establishing a new zoning district to be known as the Technology Mix Zone, the TM Zone. Looking at the overview of this request, it is based off of encouraging a balance of land uses to help Post Falls remain a desirable and stable, sustainable community, and to create regulations that encourage development of a suitable scale and to have commercial facilities throughout the community. And these are the complementary comprehensive plan policies. Regarding to Highway 41, looking at how to preserve the Highway 41 corridor plan and the text on this. We know the intent is to go up there, but as I stated earlier, it could go anywhere within Post Falls, but would be consistent with the Highway 41 corridor plan. So here are some highlights of the zoning district. You see here, designated commercial. So that's why we had the previous hearing, is to, one, get a commercial designation. The other one, the GS2 and GS3. Those there are, the intent was, as you're aware, we're doing a comprehensive plan update and a zoning code update. Those are districts that our consultant is intending to create. And so the idea was, if we create a code that could be consistent with the future map. I'm kind of impartial whether or not those stay or not. We could add them later once we go through the comp plan. Looking at these other ones, areas readily served by collector arterial streets. Looking at making sure that there's public services availability for the intensity of the use. Keep at least 20 net acres. So have a large enough site that you could then do some of the diversity that I'll go into a little bit, because there's some proportionality stuff, restrictions, and development agreement stuff that we looked at, saying, well, you need to at least have enough acreage to make it make sense. Once you get to a small enough land, it wouldn't make sense to have this zone. Areas adjacent to residential zones, districts. The original language had districts when we went through P&Z. It was brought up that maybe going to zones would add some additional clarifications, but only if they're located across an arterial or collector street from residential zones and are not materially detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare to nearby residents. Once again, it's getting to some of the planning principles, health, safety, and welfare, making sure no use does any sort of negative impacts to the existing environment. And then looking at the configuration of municipal infrastructure and neighboring land uses and the compatibility for allowing the zone. Within the land use table, we would add the TM zone, so you would look at what's permitted or not permitted for the TM zone. You see here that individual retail buildings are limited here to 10,000 square feet, but then a special use permit to go up to 20 of net floor area. And then also multifamily residential use, as well as the commercial, wouldn't exceed 30% of a development site for either one of those two uses. And that would be entertained as part of a development agreement where you would have a plan, a site plan associated with the development. You'd know kind of where the uses were being proposed or how it would go, and it would be all embodied into that development agreement. So that leads us to the development agreement. This here it's allowed by the state code here, 676511A. And so it would be required for anybody with a TM zone to go through this development agreement process to be reviewed and approved by council. And you can also see there's a time limit of 6 months after granting the annexation or rezone to get this agreement before you. Some other stuff here, maybe some standards, setbacks, interior, side, and rear. For lots bordering zone edges would be 25 feet. Internal though to the sites, 10 feet, and you can see here for buildings over 25 feet, you would get 1 additional foot of setback per height. So as you go a little bit more vertical, then it would push the structure closer to the center of the site or the lot. Maximum heights, so if you're within a residence, within 300 feet of a residential zone, it would be 45 feet would be the max. All the other areas would be 75 feet, of which with a special use permit you may be able to go greater. All still would need to get that setback, so if you went taller you would then just eventually migrate to you're in the middle of 200 acres with a taller building with not much around you. Parking. The intent is just to use our current parking standards. We deal with different parking elements for commercial and industrial and residential elements, so you would still meet the same parking requirements in our Title 18. Landscaping, we did make one change to our code here. We currently have it zoning residential, commercial, industrial, and you have these prescriptions, B, A, C. That corresponds with this table in the code that gives you different widths of buffer and what's required. So by doing this, changing this to use will allow us to utilize this, the TM zone, and whatever use went in it, apply some sort of buffer yard to it. So, like I stated, I did reach out to Connie Kruger in Hayden, and her concern regarding this zoning district was what kind of control measures did we have for the development, and then what kind of impacts it would have for on transportation systems and going to their community. That's where the development agreement comes in a bit, is that is going to be the control measure of meeting the setbacks, the design standards, the uses, compatibility. And as far as traffic, Highway 41 is going to be improved. Prairie is eventually going to get improved to 5 lanes, such that a development, if it showed that it provided a reasonable impact above what would be expected as part of the Highway 41 corridor plan, then there would be a traffic study done at that time. But such that they met what would be expected for what we are being improved to, then there wouldn't be a traffic impact study typically. So outside of that collaboration with the shared tier, I did hear from Kootenai County Fire. It's much redundant of before. So for pertaining to that site, and once again I want to reiterate that I don't want to get lost in the fact that yes, there's this industrial park, but this is a zone for the whole city for either annexation or rezone. So that would conclude,
John, I know Al's got a question for you. Before I want to ask a real quick question. You talked about 30%, and that's multifamily or commercial. Is that 30% each, combination thereof?
that's the 30% of the development's site.
Yeah,
So
the
that would be,
development site.
so we would look at the whole site at the time of looking at the development agreement, saying, well, what do you want to do? Where's the multifamily? Where's the commercial? Well, how does that break down? We would look at a matrix of that and look at whatever buffering and the other stuff I mentioned at the time. So, and then the 30% is negotiable a little bit. I mean, I know that when it comes to some other sections with commercial, I think you saw some definitions requested by zoning. They wanted to have commercial defined, I think use 2100, 2300, and 2500 as called out in our land use table to get some more clarity, so there's not some ambiguity of what would be facilitated with the zoning district. So potentially that may be something to discuss with the applicant on, is that 30% too.
But that 30% you've got up there is commercial and multifamily, so the combination thereof could not exceed 60% of the total zone?
Of 60% commercial and yes.
Okay, I want to make sure.
And the intent is a mixed, technology mix. That's why there's the mixed, is because the intent is to have different uses in one site, hopefully complementing each other.
I'm good?
Okay, I was just curious.
No, I'm not good. I mean, I might get to go.
Good to go.
So John, talk to me a little bit about why, if this is commercial and we saw the picture that Brad put up there, that he doesn't even want residential in this property, why would we include this in the definition of this zone? Why would we allow 30% multifamily?
Honestly, I'm not partial one way or the other what percentage. One could see maybe that if you have a campus-like setting with some commercial services that providing dorms and or some surety in housing, that marketing it for an employment base, that they could provide it nearby. But once again, it may be worth talking to the applicant and finding what, because this was a collaborative effort, which the staff and the applicant wanted to provide a zone different than the industrial zoning designate. There's uses that are currently permitted in the industrial zone that they wouldn't want permitted outright while marketing this, because it would serve as potentially being detrimental in marketing this. So then in the discussion was, then now we need a new zone.
Okay.
What would that zone look like?
But the applicant's already in writing and verbalized here tonight that they have no interest in residential. So we could pare that back without having any impact on them at this point in time, right?
I would ask them that question.
Okay.
I just know that I'm open to different percentages.
Because what I'm looking at is this zone, this piece of property that we're looking at right now tonight, if we apply that 30% multifamily, could result in over 1,300 units on that piece of property. That's way more people than we need for a tech park. I was thinking if we still wanted to leave it mixed use, we could pare that back to say 10%, and it would still be over 400 units, which would more than enough satisfy enough people living and working in that campus-like area. So do you think 10%, is that something we could build into this?
Do you want to bring the applicant? Well, applicant should come up in a minute. Do you want to ask them that question when they come up?
Sure.
Will that work for you?
However we get to the end product, I'm kind of focused on 10% versus 30%.
Councilor Wolf, you certainly, this is an ordinance draft so that you can take a look at it and make changes, recommended changes. This is your chance to decide what the zone looks like. I can tell you a little bit of the history of this. This is based on a zoning district, actually two zoning districts out of Boise. They had two versions of this, one a little bit more intense, a little bit more dirty, if you will, a little more dirty industry than the other. We sort of blended those together and came up with one zoning district. I don't know that there was any magic in the exact percentages. That's just sort of what was thrown out there. While this developer in this location may not want residential, this is intended to be sort of something that could be applied at other sites in the city where they may want to have an element of a dormitory or whatever to bring in workers if they've got folks coming in for training or whatever. That was the idea of having some level of residential, as well as having a live, work, walk environment. Again, the percentages, that's really for you to decide as a council.
Well, I guess that's where I'm talking more to the council at this point in time, and that is, how do you guys feel about this? Because I guess what concerns me is, obviously, we've all seen the pictures of what people want to bring, but if we make this change tonight and we adopt this zone, then it's there. It's black and white. And if we then apply that zone to this piece of property, that does not in any way, shape, or form guarantee us that we're going to get the pretty picture that Brad put up there. What we could end up with is 1,300 multifamily units on that piece of property by permit. Am I correct?
By right.
By right. I mean, they don't have to come back and really ask for us to,
Well, it would
so
be a
if
part
Brad,
of the,
if Brad's people, or if that piece of property ends up in the hands of somebody else who comes in and says, you know what, the tech park idea was a great idea, but it just didn't fly. So we're going to put multifamily there. We could end up with 1,300 multifamily units on that piece of property.
they proposed maybe an amendment to the development agreement, and then there'd be a process, but they could request, if that's what the math works out, they could request that as part of their development agreement.
Yeah, okay.
So-
So that's my concern for the council, is that 30% to me is just way too high for this type of zone. It's intended to be a zone for jobs and for businesses, and structured in such a way that we could attract the Intels and the Amazons and the whoever, not more multifamily. So I'm asking the council if they would consider paring that back to 10%.
Mr. Wilson, can we address that now, or should we go
So,
through
yeah,
the
like
process and
a
let's?
couple quick thoughts. First, we probably ought to get through the public testimony, make sure that you've heard everybody's testimony before we get into that level of deliberation. Also, I wanted to follow up on something that John mentioned and make sure that you caught that when we get through this, so we have an approved zone and we have somebody come in and wants to request this zone, we're going to require a development agreement, which is a new step for us. We've not had that before. In that process, we're essentially going to tie them to a site plan. If they're going to tell us what the types of uses that they want to have on their development, where they want to put them, how they want to put that together, that's going to be cemented in an agreement. So if they want to do something different, they're going to have to come back and amend that agreement. So it's an additional level of protection. That isn't to say it couldn't happen. I'm just saying that there is that additional level of protection that we hopefully know what we're getting and we can lock them into that.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and continue with the process, and we'll get into that.
Any other questions,
Next one.
John, at this point? Are you okay with?
I'm good.
Okay.
All
Anybody
right,
else?
thank you.
Mr. Marshall?
Back to that one. There we go. Again, for the record, Brad Marshall, 7825 Meadowlark Way in Coeur d'Alene. Again, it's a pleasure to represent the applicants. Again, we're proposing the adoption of this technology make zone. Again, let's take a look. Technology make zone provides for well-designed technology industrial parks that can accommodate light industrial, technology, professional office, together with limited commercial and residential uses that support the workshop live environment. Approval of the tech make zone requires a development agreement as provided in section 18.2. That development agreement, in this case, would be an annexation agreement. That would be your control. When we developed that tech park concept a year or two ago, to be frank, we were not sure that an industrial zone or a heavy industrial zone was a good fit for this site. Would it be compatible with the future growth of this area? So we looked around the West at business parks to see what kind of zoning were applied to those parks. We looked through Washington, Oregon, California. We found probably the best example in Boise. City of Boise zoning code. And again, it was wrapped around the Micron facility. As Warren mentioned, there were 2 zoning districts. We brought those back to Warren and John. And we collaboratively worked together over a course of a couple months to develop this new tech mix zone. Warren and John are great to work with. I mean, we arm wrestle a little bit. They won because they're bigger. But in the end, we developed what we believe is a great zoning district. Kind of moving forward. We hope to bring these type of uses, whether it's Micron or Intel. These type of users make huge capital investments. And they want to make sure that all the utilities are there, that the workforce is there, utility rates are there. They want to make sure their housing opportunities are there. They want to make sure that the zoning and the CC&Rs, the conditions, covenants, restrictions, protect their investment. They don't want heavy industrial use next to their technology use. Those are incompatible uses. So that's where the zoning comes into play. Quite frankly, I believe that this zone can be used as quite frankly, as an economic development tool, marketing tool to attract this type of industry to this area. So I think it's a good fit with your other zoning districts. Obviously, we want to apply it to the campus in itself. If you think about, maybe we'll go back. Other zoning districts in your city, the industrial zones or the heavy industrial zones, you've got a lot of industrials along Southeast Way, particularly as you get closer to the state line area. You've got a heavy industrial zone right here in the middle of town, the Malloy Cedar Mill. Time will tell how that kind of works. But would that be a good fit on the prairie? Probably not. That's again where we think that technology mix zone is a good tool to apply to this property. We talked in the last hearing about Coeur d'Alene a little bit, again, how they've got these commercial zones along 95 between Hanley and Prairie, and the compatibility of those zones and those uses and how they kind of intermix. That's kind of an aerial photo of the same thing. You kind of see the Silver Lake Mall and those uses. Balance back. Other good examples of business parks that we kind of modeling after, hope to kind of create, are one's right here in town. One is the Riverbend Commerce Park, developed by the Jacqueline family about 20 years ago. Great project, great buildings. They've got AK Alboa, Buck Knives, Raycap, great industries that they've been successful in bringing in, the city has. What's interesting, that site's zoned industrial. So it was really the CC&Rs that protected that investment there, ensured that project was developed the way it is today. Another good example is the Liberty Lake Tech Parks, just across the state line. Again, a lot of tech industries have landed there. Washington used to have some incentives that we didn't have, but we've got some incentives that now that we can compete. Again, that's a great project, but both those two will probably build out, and that's why we want to bring this one on, because this is a 10, 20-year project. It will take time. I'm going to move on. Talk about that. I'm going to take 2 seconds and address Councilman Wolf's questions about residential. As I mentioned before, we don't plan any residential in this project. We looked at the surrounding land uses. There's Foxtail PUD, which is growing out nicely and it's moving along. Tullamore, that's growing out, both struggled through the recession, but growing out very nicely. Who would have thought we'd have apartments on Charville and in Prairie, but there's a lot of mixed use there. I believe Greenstone, the Schneidmiller family, have a large block of land to the west of this that they'll move forward with. And then there's the Crown Point subdivision farther to the west. All good projects. So we do believe there's housing opportunities there. When we looked at that tech mix zone, a lot of other jurisdictions, they intermix the tech and the residential together. They were trying to create that work-live environment. I would not envision single-family homes in a project like this, but maybe as John speaks, it could be dormitory housing, apartments, possibly townhomes or condominiums. People want to be able to live close to work and shop and intermix. We're trying to create a campus, and you ideally need that campus to attract the type of big investments, high-tech industries who do their due diligence They're not going to pick a raw piece of land that has heavy industrial zone, and you've got to have your act together. In regards to that 30%, that was actually captured from Boise, we'll be frank. And we kind of, I think John and Warren and I chatted about that quite a bit. What's the perfect fit here? And we were kind of not really looking at this project. We were looking at other areas that may be annexed in the city with this zone, particularly maybe along your western front, maybe it's out by the state line area. We can't, I'm not sure if those type of development groups will want residential or not, time will tell. But as a planner, I think there is a fit if it's an appropriate design. What is your protection on this one? You're looking at a conceptual master plan. You'll notice a grid of streets that's based on your Highway 41 and your Post Falls Transportation Master Plan. So it creates a grid of collectors and arterials that we fundamentally have to adhere to. Lots of green space, lots of buildings. It's our best guess of how this thing will develop. The grid framework will pretty much stay. Utility framework pretty much has to stay because it's driven by topography and gravity and sewer lines. We've talked about attaching this conceptual site plan to the annexation agreement. So that's your protection. So when this project moves into the subdivision development stage, your staff can look back and as the commissioner of the council and say, well, this was the concept master plan. This is the fundamental framework that you guys promoted. This is what you have to adhere to in concept. Things change in the land use world, particularly in the commercial world. They always call it like those amoebas in biology days. They always changing a little bit, but fundamentally the framework's there. And we would not be opposed to attaching that concept plan to the annexation agreement as a protection that this is what we're committing to. And if we want to change, or if there's a new buyer, heaven forbid, then they need to come back before council and change that and get a blessing. I guess in the end, on the comments regarding the technology zone, we've worked hard to look at other districts, work great with staff to create a document that I think fits with your zoning code, and think it's a good fit with the other zones, and would respectfully request adoption of the technology make zone.
Thank you, Brad. Any questions, Brad?
Hi, Brad.
Councilman Wolf.
All that, and I still didn't get an answer, I guess, to my question. That is, would you be adverse to us adjusting the code, the zone, to 10% multifamily versus 30%? You've already stated that you have no intention whatsoever, so it'll fit your project, no problem.
Yeah, I think that's more of a, we probably would not, in honesty. But that's really an item of debate between the council.
Okay, but we wanted to get your opinion
Yeah.
on that.
I think there's an opportunity for housing. We see the need and how it could fit with a good code, but that's really a council's debate.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any questions, Brad? You're done.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
With that, no rebuttal. I will close the public hearing. Council, how would you like that?
I guess I would ask the rest of the council if they would object to my suggestion that we change that from 30% to 10%.
I think that's pretty low, especially if you consider the amount of people that work in that kind of industry in those buildings. I would be more likely willing to compromise maybe in the middle of that, Al, but I think if you make it too little of living area for people, because if you think about 20 acres minimum to build one of those tech buildings, and those tech buildings hold, 500, 600, 700 workers, and they don't have anywhere to live close by, I'd be willing to say maybe change it to 20%. On this particular amendment, however, I would suggest that we tie the concept to the approval of the amendment agreement. That would be my thoughts.
Okay. I would guess I'd push back on that, and Brad brought up a perfectly good example, and that's like the Jacqueline area. You know, there's all kinds of businesses out there that they have no housing on that site, but yet they have no problem finding, well, reasonable efforts to find people. I don't think anybody doesn't work there because there's no housing on site. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I still think if we go back to like, this is a good example of what we're talking about. 10% is still, 23 acres of multifamily housing. I think that's plenty. Plus, it's almost surrounded by other housing, so there's not a lack of housing in this particular case. And I really don't even see where, even trying to look into the future, where would we find a place that somebody would want to do this where there wouldn't be adequate housing close by? I mean, we got Tullamore close by, we got Foxtail close by. Brad mentioned, I mean, there's plenty of housing nearby. I don't think we need to make the zone such that it comes with its own housing. I think it's okay to have it there, a mix, like you say, like a dormitory or something like that. But I don't think we want to, I guess where I'm going to stick with the 10%. I'm hoping that I can get at least a couple other counselors to go along with 10% versus 20.
Jerry, you want to weigh in?
I say 15.
I see your 10 and raise you 5.
Quick debate.
I think the 30 is high. 10 might be, so you got 23 acres, you're saying with 10%, that'd be 23 acres.
Which
That
comes
could
out to
be-
like 400 units, 400 housing units on this property. This property alone, 400 housing units. I think that's a lot. I think that's plenty.
Yeah, I don't feel real strongly either way. I think, I agree with Linda to the point of not making it restrictive. This particular site, they don't have plans for it at this point,
Yeah.
but it's something that we're gonna live with for other locations, so I don't have great heartburn with the 30%. 10% I think is a little low.
Joe? I'm empathetic also to Linda's point on this, is as the plots get smaller, and there's a 20-acre minimum on this, then 10%, gives you 2 acres, and you have inroads and parking and everything else, it doesn't leave much to put much anything on there. So in a case of a large lot like this, 10% is a lot, but in a smaller lot, if it's going to be citywide for the future, it might be a bit tight. So I think I would actually propose to see your 10 and raise you 5 as a general compromise to help accommodate smaller developments within the city using the TM zone.
But even, I mean, you're thinking that somebody that wants to come and build like an Intel on a 20-acre plot is going to want to have a dormitory on that lot?
It may or may not.
Okay. So I guess I would almost look at it the other way around. I'd rather have them come back and ask us, could I get some more land or some more, change the zone, if you will, versus what do we call it, the development plan? That to me is just, we've already been down that road already a few times where developers come back and say, geez, this isn't working out. Can't you guys change the plan? And, we end up doing that. Because at that particular time, it's tough for them to make a dime. So we make that change for them. I want to make something that's a little harder for them to change. I'd rather see them come back and ask us to say, you know what, we'd really like to come. Here's what we'd like to do. Can you up the ante from 10% to 15? And then we can say, you know what, in this case, under these circumstances, we will do that. See what I'm saying?
No, I'm
Rather
following
than
you.
fighting them one way.
Steve?
I don't know, I'm looking at this project, and I see Al's point, because this project does have lots of housing development around it, but there could be sections in the west part of the city that doesn't have those housing opportunities and might not be developed out there. So I'm more leaning towards the 15% in there. I think 30 might be high, 10 I think's low, so I'm kind of right in the middle, about 15%, just due to the geographic area where these developments could happen.
Lynn?
I'm kind of torn. I could go either way, 10, 15. I look at the opportunities, though, where we can look at 20 acres within the city and where we're growing. And out on the west side, we do have apartment buildings going up on Beck Road. So we have housing available in the community. So I'm not too concerned about them having a place on site to live. I think there is plenty of opportunity out there, so I could go either way.
Linda, you want to weigh in again? Any
No,
more?
thanks.
Well, first of all, I think this is, I think it's a great opportunity. I like the idea of the technology zone, mix zone. Depending on whatever council decides, I probably won't get to vote, but I look forward to this, and my only wish is that it wouldn't take 5 to 20 years, because I think that the type of businesses that you can attract, especially in light of the recent decisions made by the Seattle City Council, is just going to open up opportunities for locations like this. So I look forward to, I've got a feeling it's going to pass, but I have no idea what the number is at this point, but I look forward to the opportunity. So with that, I will entertain a motion and see who wants to float one.
I would make a motion. I would move that we approve RZNE-002-2018 with the change of maximum multifamily to 15% versus 30%.
Second.
Oh, motion and a second. You surprised me, Mr. Wolf.
Compromise.
Oh, I know it. I appreciate it. Any further, we have motion second. Further discussion? Seeing none, Shannon, please take the roll.
Malloy.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, council.
That
That
was
was
10 when we got to you. I
very
didn't
good. Third
I can compromise.
public hearing. Yeah, I know you can. Just surprised me. I thought you were going to hold your 10. The third public hearing tonight is Prairie Crossing West annexation. And with that, I will open that public hearing. I'm assuming Mr. Manley's presenting again.
Yeah, there'll be a couple tonight. So the applicant's the same as the previous two. The file number's changed, as you can see there. This here is the public hearing to annex approximately 245 acres with the technology zoning designation to be applied to it. The zoning element of this annexation was recommended for approval as part of the March 21st public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission. Here's the location that you see there in the red hatched boxed area with Highway 41 and Prairie abutting this project. Area city impact, I think I've gone over that, some of the concerns of the adjacent jurisdictions and comments I have received or not received pertaining to this proposed use at this location. As stated before, Ross Point will be providing water, with sewer being provided by the city of Post Falls. And looking at the zoning aspect of it, they looked at the street classifications, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, and community plans or geographical and natural features at the P&Z. They found that the street classification traffic patterns for Highway 41 and Prairie being major arterials as complementary, plus looking at the Highway 41 corridor plan as the proposal being consistent with it, looking at the existing development you have in the city of Post Falls. You've got Tullamore to the south and commercial land abutting it to the southeast, and a TM zone would be compatible with it. Future land use, you're looking at now it's allowed within the commercial designation within the comprehensive plan, so it would be consistent with that element of it. Lastly, the goal is to encourage a balance of land uses to help Post Falls remain a desirable, stable, sustainable community, and it was felt that the TM zone would accomplish this. Commercial and high-density residential is typically assigned along streets with higher road classifications. That goes false suit to the previous comment being arterials nearby. Limited or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential zoning is typically assigned properties further away. That's not the case, being the fact where we're at Highway 41 and Prairie. Industrial zoning is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes and may be situated away from residential zoning. So this technology mix entertains what kind of compatible uses can be intermingled next to some of the corridors, and it provides the mixing of uses complementary to arterials rather than encouraging lower density near that type of infrastructure. Exhibit S4 goes into some of the comprehensive plan policies. This is just an overview. It's more detailed in the staff report, but the three main ones that kind of look at this, actually I think there's 6 on this, but zoning and land to be annexed must comply with the City of Post Falls comprehensive plan and master plans facilities. This is true. One exception I will note is there was the reference to the sewer study that's being looked at right now for facilitating. That there is planned to come before you June 5th. So this ultimately wouldn't be approved until the annexation agreement and ordinance comes before you, which will get past that study at that time. So the intent is to be consistent. Land to be annexed should enable a completion and continuation of pedestrian network that connects neighborhoods, amenities to the centers throughout the community. One thing about this upon development, there's the Prairie Trail that runs from, you can kind of pick it up here, running from the southeast to the northwest. The intent is to connect this site with the Prairie Trail. So you would end up getting neighborhoods to the east connected to this, and ultimately we'd like to figure out a way to get that trail to the west and connect the rest of the community to the west to this also. So there is plans for that. Timing and annexation should be coordinated with opportunities for orderly development of public systems. I referred to the sewer master plan as a coordinated effort. And then that the looking at water, sewer, transportation, parks, and emergency services is a part of that. As far as water, they have coordinated with Ross Point to reserve the water needed to facilitate the site. And we've heard comments from emergency services. Encourage a balance of land uses. That kind of dovetails into the zoning requirements. It's basically the same language. When land is annexed into the city, appropriate zoning designations shall be applied after consideration of future land use map. We've already heard that this evening, the road classification, a lot of the same themes with these other policies. Walking distance, kind of covered that already with that Prairie Trail. Agencies routed, as you see here. And once again, it's the same theme from the fire department, although they are, in this case, instead of neutral, more supportive of the annexation. So at this time, I'd stand for questions you have for me.
Any questions of John on this one? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Mr. Marshall, anything to add? Applicant or?
Yeah. Not like putting a guy who works for an engineering company at a podium. It scares the blank out of you. Nonetheless, Brad Marshall, 7825 Meadowlark Way, Coeur d'Alene with JEB Engineers, again, represent the investor group on this project, which is led by Philip Worth. The side note, again, Philip's been developing through the city for a long time, 17 years. A little historical background, he was a big part of what was called the Highway 41 Sewer LID that ran sewer up the highway and actually posted a healthy surety that benefited that project. Was part of the Tullamore project and then ultimately sold it to another group of developers who went on. Developed the State Line Business Park in and around Cisco and Cabela's. Great success. Wanted to thank the council for your prior actions, prior approvals on the comprehensive plan amendment and the text amendment, and well done, thank you. I'm going to try and be short on the annexation request, and I apologize if I get long, because I'm going to cover a lot of the same items that we talked about in the comprehensive plan, because there's a lot of similarities in annexation and comprehensive plan amendments. You're talking about zoning and land use and utilities and those type of things. I had an opportunity to visit with Warren a little bit this morning about that concern about covering the same thing, and Warren tells me you can adopt the testimony from the comprehensive plan hearing and apply it to to this annexation request. And if you were to do that, I would still probably run through a brief PowerPoint. Again, I'll still try to be short. I was thinking about today, it might be like, remember the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray? You go over and over, but I'll try not to go that far, but nonetheless. So, Warren, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, if you wanted to adopt the applicant's testimony from the prior two hearings into this record, make that a motion, that may, essentially, then you can consider that as part of the record for this item tonight.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Shannon, please take the roll.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Testimony's
Thank
is
you.
adopted.
So again, as John mentioned, we're requesting annexation of 245 acres to the city with that technology make zoning. It's important to point out that that 245 includes public right-of-ways that are adjacent to the project. So that's the highways, Prairie Avenue, and so forth. So part of maintenance reasons and that type of thing. Again, it's based on the prior approval of the comprehensive plan amendment and applying that technology make zone with that 15% number. Again, applying that technology make zone, we're basing on that comprehensive plan amendment that we just heard action on. And our goal is to develop that inland northwest technology park and attract high-tech users. And I'm going to respond a little bit more to Councilman Anthony's questions in the prior hearing in regards to schedule. I'm going to be cautious with my words because I'm under what's called a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA. While we are not, and our client's not actively marketing this project, getting through the entitlement processes, kind of where we're at today, we are responding to things that pop up, and there have been things that popped up. There have been several projects. In fact, we responded 3 times to an RFP for a major technology user. And that project's kind of neutral right now, but it was a major user, major jobs, and a major capital investment. Super exciting. It is neutral right now. There's no promises. But it's a great indicator of the type of users that are out there looking along the West Coast for sites that have these characteristics. There's another user that, again, popped up, and we responded to that one and worked with that technology user too. And that one's a little bit neutral too as they work through some financing, structuring in the development world, in the banking, financing world, permitting world. Sometimes projects go dark for a while as they pop their head up later as they work through those challenges. But there's some good indicators, tremendous indicators, and it's pretty darn exciting. So I continue to kind of move forward. Again, we hope to attract those type of users, whether or not it's Micron or Intel type uses, time will tell. Again, this tremendous site, it's on the edge of town for today. Highway 41, Prairie Avenue, lots of collectors and arterials to support transportation. One of the prior items that was talked about was transportation impacts. There was a significant transportation study, traffic study done for the Highway 41 corridor. They don't do $40 million projects without doing a lot of study on those. And so they'll rebuild that highway starting in 2020. Portions of Prairie Avenue will be rebuilt too at the intersections. Prairie Avenue, if you think about it, is a 5-lane arterial that runs to about Meyer Road, and then it tapers down to just 2 lanes, and then it pops to the Highway 41. It's my understanding the Highway District will start to secure funding for that last leg of Prairie Avenue, so we may have a nice network of new highway and new Prairie Avenue. As users come along in this project, we'll be going through subdivision applications, and there may be an opportunity for traffic studies at that point, pinned down to the actual user industry. If we get a major user, it may trigger a traffic study through a building permit. So my point to all that is there's mitigation measures to ensure that there's transportation impacts are addressed. Again, sewer and waters to the site. We've got KTEC and NIC in our background and a great workforce. And there's a very valuable 500 kV power lines and natural gas transmission lines to the north. Again, we've got ample water to supply the site. I mentioned this before, and I want to echo it again. The Ross Point Water District has been a great partner to the city and to this development group, and we look forward to a long future with them. As part of the development of this property, we will build the infrastructure, additional water lines and hydrants and pumps and wells and maybe a storage tank. And all that is built and ultimately transferred and accepted by the Ross Point Water District, who's your partner in providing water to your city. Again, there are many land use plans that speak to this property, whether or not it was the SMART code and the G2 and the G3 designations. Again, the Highway 41 corridor plans that speak to this property and access points. Sewer plans, whether or not old or new, which are really exciting. I'm proud to say we kind of cracked a big nut on the sewer because you've got a lot of, regardless of this project, you've got a lot of residential growth that will occur in this corridor. And we've had an opportunity to work with staff and develop some great sewer solutions. We've got some arm wrestling to do with staff on what's called annexation agreement, who pays for what, and make sure that's equitable. You know, ultimately, there are great solutions there. Again, we talked about fiber. There's a fiber network there today, and we hope to enhance that through the Highway 41 corridor plan. Again, Post Falls is growing. You know, some are excited about it, some are not. But we want to provide jobs and opportunities and tax base. It's a great town, obviously. The Inland Northwest Technology Park. Lots of opportunities, lots of hurdles that we've gone through and a few hurdles to get through. Nonetheless, we're excited about it, modeled after some other successful parks in the area. A goal, again, advanced manufacturers, microchip manufacturers, semiconductor manufacturers, data centers, aerospace. We talked about similar land uses, and whether or not it's Coeur d'Alene or Liberty Lake or right here in town, Riverbend Commerce Park, which is a great park. Again, we hope to develop a campus where there is housing that's close in this case, but it's not to say that you may find a different development group that wants to integrate housing within their project. Yeah, we'll back it up. We've worked hard with staff. Your staff has been great to work with. We've amended the comprehensive plan. We've created a technology zone with staff. We've worked with them on sewer studies and addressed traffic and water and so forth. We've got a basis of information, whether or not it's comp plans or SMART codes or sewer master plans to support the annexation request. I want to politely remind that your own planning commission unanimously recommended approval of the annexation and the technology make zone. With that, we respectfully request approval.
Any questions, Brad?
Stand for questions.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Shannon, anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
Again, I'm going to make the rash assumption that there's no rebuttal, and I will close the public hearing.
I would move to approve the Prairie Crossing West annexation file number A-17-05.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Shannon, please take the roll.
Anthony?
Aye.
Borders?
Aye.
Wilhelm?
Aye.
Thorson?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Malloy?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, Mayor. May I say one thing?
Yes.
I would just like to thank you, Brad Marshall, very much because this is so exciting for Post Falls. I just think you have done a tremendous job, and I thank you very much for that.
Agreed. We're halfway through public hearings. Everyone all right? You want to take 5 minutes?
Can we take 5 minutes?
We're going to take 5 minutes at Joe's request. We'll recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Next item up, public hearing number 4, City of Post Falls Parks annexation.
Applicant, where's? Okay, so the applicant is the City of Post Falls Parks Department. And the request is to annex approximately 3.2 acres with the single-family R1 zoning designation. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended at their April 10th commission meeting for the single-family R1 designation to be part of this annexation. Here's the project location you see here on the northeast corner of Horse Haven and Cecil. The road classifications for those are their collector roadways, which would be compatible with the zoning designation. Land use is currently residential. Water would be provided by Ross Point, with the city providing sewer. Zone change criteria element of this, looking at the street classifications traffic patterns. So the collectors and traffic patterns would be compatible with the proposed zoning designation. Existing development, you have a school, a church to the south, a school to the west with other residents in the county. So R1 would be compatible with the existing environment. There's the zoning. You can see R1 to the south and to the west. Currently, I know someone may look, well, that's a church and a school, so why is that R1? Our code allows churches and schools to be allowed within the R1 through a special use permit. We used to have a public reserve institution, but this is, at this point, how it's played out. Future land use, it's designated as residential, so it'd be compatible with that element as well. The next criteria is commercial and high-density residential is typically assigned along streets with higher road classifications. It wouldn't be the case, so the R1 would meet this condition by default. Limited or neighborhood commercial and lower density residential zoning is typically assigned for properties that get further away from your urban activity centers or corridors. This would be true and would be applicable to the R1. The last criteria for zoning is pertaining to industrial and wouldn't be applicable. And because of this is why the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the R1 as part of the annexation. Looking at the Exhibit S4, this is an overview of all the comprehensive plan, but looking at zoning, it must comply with the comp plan, and we see that it does have the future land use map showing residential, so it'd be consistent there. It's not incompatible with other master plans and facility plans. The next one deals with being coordinated and timely for orderly development of the public systems for master plans, water, sewer, transportation, parks, emergency services. If you look at, this is a little county island surrounded by city, so we actually encourage infill development and deeming it as orderly development with utilities nearby. And when service needs can priority should be given to infill. So I just spoke on that. There's the agencies that were routed pertaining to the annexation request. County commented, stated where they're neutral, they're within the boundary, and where they would serve the site by. So I'd stand for questions you have for staff on the proposed annexation.
Questions for John? Al, go ahead.
John, I'm just curious about how did we get this property?
The applicant being Dave Fair, with the Parks Director, may be able to speak to more on the hows and whys.
Yeah.
Horse traded.
This particular piece of property we actually purchased last year. We went before council, executive session, then we purchased it. The 3.5 acres came up. It was one of those purchases that the price was really good. And it filled within that service map. That was the area that we had a void in there, and this took care of it. So the city purchased it with impact fees last year.
Okay. I guess I thought it was someplace else.
No.
Until I saw this map. But
Go ahead.
is it your, who's going to actually own it? Is it Parks Is Parks going to own it?
The city owns it.
City owns it. So
And
we
we
can
look
use it
at-
for anything we want. It doesn't have to be a park.
That, well, we'd have probably impact fees we'd have to address on that part, but
Yeah, you've spent park impact fees dollars to acquire it, so those dollars are for park purposes.
So you can't put multifamily housing there.
As much as you'd want to, Alan.
I think I just fell in love with, I remember now that the price was crazy good. But it just seems odd to me that we'd want to build a park right across from, 40 acres of park, being the school?
you do have the school there. It's not always open or available at all times, and that was the discussion. The other thing is originally we'd looked down closer to the Quad Park area.
Yeah, that's where I thought.
And the reality was that at that time, council directed us to look at other properties, that there had to be a better deal out there. We looked and looked. This is where the better deal was, and it was a great price. And it met that need for that neighborhood, for that service area.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Steve?
So Dave, are you planning more of a passive type park there?
Neighborhood park. For now, we're holding it. We're using the house, and that'll be where we'll probably stage all our construction for Tullamore Park, for the storing of equipment, any of that construction stuff there, and also the sports complex. But we look at this as housekeeping. We'd rather have our own police department there. You know, if we have issues, we'd rather have our planning and zoning there as we look to develop it. And
Any questions of Dave? Thank you. So that's going to be the staff report and the applicant, right? Anyone wishing to testify? Neutral wishing to speak, Mr. Flowers.
Some reason
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Bob Flowers. I just want to ask an obvious question. At our last city council meeting, the Parks Department stated they were out of men, out of equipment. They couldn't maintain our sewage treatment area. We had to take on a very expensive outside contractor to do the work there. How do they plan on maintaining another park now, another 3+ acres, if they don't even have the manpower to maintain what we do have? I mean, the city right now already owns this piece of property. So if we don't annex it right now, no big deal, the city still owns it. I guess I'm trying to figure out where all this extra money or manpower is going to come from when we've already been told they don't have it. That's my question.
I don't think it's, this is a request to annex it, take it from the county into the city. It's not a request for development funds or to develop the park immediately. But as Mr. Fair said, he'd rather have the city property that the city owns within the city limit for police, et cetera, than to have it in the county. So this is nothing to do with giving David approval to go ahead and start developing a park. And, you buy the land when you can if the price is right. You
Right.
develop the park when you can afford to. But all this is moving from the county to the city.
Okay.
Thank you. Also wishing to testify, neutral, Dan Glenn. And you want me to read, did you wish to speak, or do you want me to, come on up, please, name for the record. Absolutely.
Don't want to make anybody nervous walking behind them. Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you. Daniel Glenn, and do I need to give my address? Okay. My property backs up to this piece of property that was purchased. So my concerns are a few if it's going to be a park. As a retired peace officer, I have extensive experience with what parks bring to residential areas when they're in close proximity, especially as someone who would share a fence line with that property, especially if there is a public restroom associated with that park. The level of crime and the types of crime that it brings are significant. So that would be a definite concern that I would have just with that alone. There's many, as our chief of police and others in his department can testify to, that there's an element that finds attending these parks with a given legitimate reason that is not. They state that they have a legitimate reason to be there, but they're there to watch children. That concern is, I would have that concern for the park in general, but since my yard is exactly right behind the park, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that my children would then be visible to whoever is at the park. So that would be another concern that I have. The third concern that I have is my own personal liability. I do have a dog in my yard. Right now we have an invisible fence, the underground kind, because we couldn't afford to fence the property when we purchased it. I shouldn't assume, but I'm going to assume that if the city puts a park there, that the city will put a fence there. However, I feel like my liability would increase if somebody throws a Frisbee into my yard and they go over the fence to retrieve a Frisbee and then my dog bites them. You know, then I feel like I have some additional exposure to that. Those are probably the major concerns that I would have as a property owner at this time. So, thank you.
You bet. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'd be willing to address any concerns as it moves forward. Thank you very much. With that, no rebuttal. I will close the public hearing. Council, how would you like to act?
I would move to approve the City of Post Falls Parks annexation file number ANNX-0003-2018.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Shannon, please take the roll.
Borders.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next public hearing tonight is the Benton annexation. With that, I will open the public hearing.
So yes, the Benton annexation, there's the case file you see there, with the owner being Don Benton Jr. Living Trust, with the applicant A Solutions LLC. The request is to review and approve the proposed annexation with the proposed limited commercial LC zoning designation. This was recommended at the Planning and Zoning Commission on April 10th for the limited commercial designation as part of annexation. Here's the project location. You see it on the northeast corner of Pole Line and Greens Ferry. And I do want to add, this is an interesting parcel because there is an Avista, or not Avista, but there's a gas line that runs through this property about southwest to the northeast, making the site somewhat complicated to develop in general. With looking at the potential frontage improvements, not that that's everything, but also with the restrictions on the site for the with the gas corridor, it made it problematic for what kind of development could go here because it didn't really fit for single family on an intersection of this magnitude on Greens Ferry and Pole Line. So they're looking at potentially with as a neighborhood commercial type, limited commercial, that this could potentially could be facilitated as you may be able to do some surface parking over the gas line and maybe able to put a few structures outside of that, some of the easements and utility corridors on the site. And then also, as I'll get into down the road, there is the need, being near the school, of somewhat attaining safe passageways for pedestrians along the east side of Greens Ferry and on Pole Line Avenue. So moving on here, the current land use is residential. So one could say, well, residential, the future land use map calls it out as residential as well. How can we do limited commercial? Why is that even entertained? Well, the future land use map talks about ADTs of over 4,000 trips. So Pole Line Avenue has some significant flow going east-west, so that, which enables the request for limited commercial in a residential area like this. Physical characteristics is like single family. There's no significant topology. Water provided by Ross Point. Water with sewer being provided by City of Post Falls. Looking over the zoning criteria, I've kind of touched base on most of the first criteria about the street classifications and traffic patterns, existing development. You have it's surrounded by single family to the north and east. On the west side, you have single family. Southwest, single family. School to the south. The point of neighborhood commercial is to provide some commercial avenues compatible with single family development. Future land uses, I discussed that. There is really no community plan specific, no geographic or natural features, and the goal is to encourage a balance of land uses to remain desirable, stable. So presumably the thought is, as the recommendation came from P&Z, that some sort of neighborhood commercial could complement the local residents nearby. Okay, sorry. The next one, commercial and high density residential zoning, is typically assigned along streets with higher road classifications. This would be the case with Pole Line and Greens Ferry. That is a higher road classification, so a commercial element would be suitable. Yeah, another one, limited neighborhood commercial and lower density, is typically assigned a property as they proceed further away from higher intense urban activities or corridors. This isn't a linear corridor with high activity, nor is it a node of high activity. So it is a bit off of like Highway 41 or Southeast Way intersections or along Mullen Avenue. The next criteria, industrial zoning, wouldn't be applicable to this request. Looking at the comprehensive plan as guidance for the annexation and looking at an overview of Exhibit S4 within your staff report. Once again, the first one kind of dovetail right in with some of the zone change criteria, making sure it's compatible with comprehensive plan and other master plans. The request is timing of the annexation should be coordinated with opportunities for orderly development. It would be considered the fact that you're surrounded by the city, that annexation request would be encouraged as it's infill and potentially could complete some of those pedestrian facilities as I alluded to. And then the other one is giving infill pockets priority, which this would be an infill pocket. Cooney County Fire commented as neutral. It's within their service boundary and the closest station being on East 16th. Do you have any questions for me as part of the limited?
John?
I got a couple.
That's why I was looking that way.
I got a couple.
John, you stated at the beginning that this property, it's unique in that it has some development issues.
Yeah,
because of the, but is it because of the pipeline? Because the pipeline runs under those houses right next door, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's also the size. I mean, if you look at, if this was like a 100-acre piece and you had a pipeline running through it, you'd have a lot of real estate to kind of move around and work with. As you neck down and this annexation was approved and leaving this out, I mean, going back in time, one could argue maybe denying this annexation because of the inability to complete the network. It may have been the case at hand at that time, but you're left with this small piece with improvements, with a large portion unbuildable. And then you can kind of see those lot lines. They attempted to adjust the utilities through this subdivision.
But why is it unbuildable? That's the part I'm confused about.
Well, it's not unbuildable. It's just to do those improvements, to put in a couple houses next to a busy corner with headlights and everything going around that
Oh, yeah,
intersection.
okay, so that part, but the pipeline doesn't come into play then? They can build houses on top of the pipeline?
No.
No.
No, but
Well, how about the houses right next door? How'd they get built on top of it?
there's an easement that runs down shared common lines, and
It's right here. It's a 50-foot easement.
Okay. So those houses next door aren't over the pipeline?
as far as where those houses are within that 50-foot wide easement, I can't speak to where they're on that subdivision. But
Okay.
I do know how that 50-foot easement affects this property and why we're here entertaining limited commercial rather than in R1, which if this didn't have that easement, it very well may be looking at a completely different land use request.
Okay. Steve, you know?
Little bit I know on some of that is over the pipeline, you can put like a storage building, something movable. You can put asphalt, things like that, but you can't normally put a permanent structure over a pipeline. But you can put storage unit or something that can be.
I just wanted to get that cleared up in my mind. The other question I had is, how would we access this property? Can we access it off both Pole Line and Greens Ferry, or is the property line too close to Pole Line to have an access on Greens Ferry?
Actually, I might ask Jim O'Kahey, he's here for the engineering division, how they would look at a site plan for this, for access on those regards.
Okay, great.
Mayor, Council, Jim O'Kahey, staff engineer. So they would be allowed to enter off both Pole Line and Greens Ferry. To help with the other question about the pipeline, there is a 50-foot easement that runs all the way through both those subdivisions. The structures are out of that easement, but like he said, you can put outbuildings that aren't permanent structures in that. But they would be allowed to access off of both Pole Line and Greens Ferry.
One more question, probably for John. Multifamily can be in the LC zone, correct?
That is an allowable use through special use permit. Once you exclude the right-of-way and the 50-foot easement, it would limit the degree of housing you could fit on a site. But yeah, there would be a potential, someone could request that as a separate hearing before Planning and Zoning Commission.
What's the maximum height for multifamily, R3 or
But
whatever?
for R3, it's 45 feet.
So on LC, is it any different?
Limited commercial, I believe,
It's in that ballpark. It's not like
35 or 45. I
it
can't.
can't be like 80 feet.
No, it's 35 or 45.
Okay, that's all.
Apologies for not knowing that specific.
I just wanted to make sure that we couldn't have an 80-foot apartment building across the street there. Mr. Wilson?
I can't speak to the exact height requirements, but this zoning district is specifically tailored for more residential, commercial mix. So it's stepped down in intensity and scale from our normal CCS because you're trying to work it into areas where it makes sense to serve local residential communities.
If you can confirm this for me, and maybe you don't know off the top of your head, but if I remember right, limited commercial can allow multifamily up to R2 densities, whereas CCS allows up to R3 density, correct?
That's my
Correct.
recollection.
Yeah, you're right. That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Does the applicant wish to present? Name for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Joe Hassel with A Solution 609 Calgary Court here in Post Falls. I was a little worried being the fifth one on the agenda tonight, but you guys have moved through this rather quickly. I hope to be another notch making it easy for you. This annexation and zone change, I believe, could be a welcome addition to the city. It's one last little island that we're getting rid of, and of course, we'd like to get rid of those islands of county within our community. I think the biggest thing that this property brings to the table is a connectivity for the community, a connectivity which was denied to this property at the development of the residential property to the north and to the east. That is not a problem or a complaint, but at the time of those developments, there were no pedestrian ways connected to this parcel or any streets connected to this parcel, which is, as we know, normally the case. I've been told that there was discussion at that time that this property would never be developed as a single-family residential. So what does it bring to the table? If you'll picture, if you will, coming down Green Ferry, on the easterly side of the street, there's a nice big barricade there where the sidewalk terminates, and you go through dirt and rocks. There's a field there. I think there's a couple critters that graze out on that property. You come down to the traffic signal structure, which is put where it is because they didn't have the right-of-way to put it where it needs to be. If you turn left and go across the pasture to the easterly end of our property, you'll get to another barricade where the sidewalk terminates. So if this property is annexed into the city, there will be a dedication of the necessary right-of-way along the northerly side of Pole Line and along the easterly side of Green Ferry to allow the infrastructure and the right-of-way improvements to be placed. In addition, there will be the 15-foot or 10-foot easement granted beyond that right-of-way for connection of future utilities. This will be a great boon, as far as I'm concerned, for connecting the pedestrian traffic coming down Green Ferry to those who want to continue on the northerly side of Pole Line. The signal can then be moved, it needs to be moved about 15 or 18 feet, I believe, to make the signal along Green Ferry wide enough to accommodate the full end use of curb-to-curb spacing and get the traffic to normal. I've talked with Rob, and I think Jim knows this too. The Yellowstone pipeline, as we know, is a liquid petroleum pipeline that traverses the city, for that matter. At this particular point, though, it goes along the north side of Pole Line within the right-of-way outside the residential fence that's there. And then it comes to a surface structure, which I believe is valving, some telemetry and meters. Then it ducks down underground again and starts on a northerly track, so it goes diagonal across the property. When it gets into the single-family residential, as Jim said, the buildings have been located so the pipeline strategically goes between all the homes through that development. You can put fence, trees, Ziggy's sheds and so forth over the pipeline, but you cannot build any permitted structure. Without connectivity to those single-family residential developments on the north and on the east, it renders this property pretty much economically dead for residential development. We would have to get our access onto each of the two streets, Pole Line and Green Ferry. Staff will have a chance to look at that and control and determine where those access points are at the time of site plan review for whatever goes onto this piece of property. It does qualify for the quantity of traffic that is on Pole Line. It's a reasonable use. We don't know exactly what's going in there. That'll be market driven. It's perceived that it would be a neighborhood commercial use, typical convenience store, shops, Pizza Hut, something, who knows what's going to go in there. It would be in compatibility with the school, and it would also provide neighborhood commercial services to all the residential in the area. I believe that's all I have. I'll entertain any questions.
Questions, Ms. Hassel?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Shannon?
Thank you.
Not wishing to speak in favor, Mr. Paul Bielek, in favor of commercial zone and annexation. In favor, not wishing to speak, is it Dan Matten?
Nothing said.
Again, not wishing to speak in favor. And not wishing to speak also in favor is Peter Temmer? Maybe wishing to speak if needed. In opposition, Justin Hunter, and the comment is sent email on May 6, 2018. Want to make sure concerns were expressed. Never received response on the email received, but that was included in our packets, as I recall. Can we confirm that?
I saw a letter from Chrissy, but I
Yeah,
didn't see.
I didn't see anything on this one.
Last name, no, I didn't see.
Mr. Hunter, you wish to come forward then? Please, name for the record.
Chrissy's last name is Albinola.
Does your projector work?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So, I don't know if this is going to work. Justin Hunter, Post Falls resident, 2628 Madera Loop. So, as requested here, this is going to be a little bit hard, but you had in question in regards to the pipeline that runs through said property on the annexation. And as you can see by the green line, the property on the left here is actually where the pump house is at, and it runs directly through the center of this said property. After talking to Mike Phillips from 66, on 66, Phillips 66, he sent me the encroachment guidelines for this property. And this property in question cannot have any structure that is not movable at this time. So as mentioned by multiple people, has to be like a Ziggy shed or something like that that can be movable. No pavement can be made at this time. I actually have in the email that I sent to you guys, that, as mentioned, I never got a response on, but I actually did the attachment for each encroachment guidelines of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. If an encroachment, if said property is supposed to be developed on, he actually sent me information in regards to where you would write to apply for anything at this time. If on this email here, so construction of parking lots over the pipeline will not be permitted without permitters, prior written approval, and hold harmless agreement, releasing permitters from any or all future damages to the parking lot. So that's unfortunately one thing that, you know, Phillips 66 requests at that time. As you can see here, there's a whole list of different guidelines of what can and cannot be on there. So that's why I'm asking for the council at this time to deny the annexation at this time until such either one, plan has been made in place for what is to be put in this into this specific property, or number two, at least get approval from Phillips 66 for at this time for anything that shall be moved forward. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Hunter, just so you know, if this property is annexed, no building permit will be allowed or plan approved until those questions are addressed.
Perfect. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. And not wishing to speak, but also in opposition, Caitlin Hunter? Thank you. Any rebuttal?
Only briefly. Only briefly, and let me state this, that we're aware of these guidelines, and I'm sure your city is as well. The streets that go across the pipeline have to meet strict criteria. The pipeline representatives are there at the site anytime there's excavation or improvements. Although flat out you cannot do what was said in that, what he pointed out, we can go through the procedure and get approvals provided we follow their guidelines. One additional thing is that Rob Paulus has told me he is already talking with them about that. It's not a pump house, it's just a location where the pipe comes to the surface, has some valving, some monitoring equipment. They look at it aerially when they fly over it. That is in conflict with the future curb gutter sidewalk that we want to continue on around. So there's going to be some work to move that to make all of this work. It'll all have to go through the red tape before we do anything. That's all.
Thank you very much. With that, I will close the public hearing. Council, how would you like to act?
Well, I think this is just, an annexation. We don't have any idea what's going to go there down the road, so I think it's pretty straightforward to get it annexed into the city and let the future developer figure out how he can deal with Phillips 66 or whoever. So I certainly support the annexation as limited commercial.
Well, I think
closing the pocket.
Yeah. I think also the improvements are needed on Greens Ferry and whole line there that would come with any development there.
And none of the regulations of what can be built over the top of the pipeline are going to be waived based on this annexation. They still have to meet all those requirements as you described, so I'm not concerned about that at this point.
Anyone care to make a motion?
I'd move to approve the Benton annexation file number ANNX-002-2018.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Shannon, please take the roll.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. And that brings us to our last public hearing for the evening, the Haven North annexation. With that, I will open the public hearing.
So the Haven North annexation request, case file, as you see there, owner Johnston Trust, applicant being J.P. Johnson of Hayden Lake. The requested action is for the City Council to review and approve an annexation of approximately 1 acre with the proposed medium-density multifamily residential R2 zoning designation. This was recommended, the zoning aspect was recommended for approval on April 10th as part of the annexation request. Project location, as you see here, is on the north side of Horsehaven, and just east of Syringa a bit, and then it would south of Travis Court at this location. The current land use is residential in the Kootenai County. Single family residential is currently there, or it's a lot with garages and RVs and on the site, and there's no significant topology or vegetation there. Ross Point Water District, Exhibit A4, did provide a will serve letter for the site. Zoning is assigned following considerations: street classifications, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans. So in regards to the adjacent streets, the proposed R2 would be compatible with the street classifications and the traffic patterns of the area. Existing development, go back to the aerial, you have this is a smart code, probably the first smart code project that came in Post Falls. This was designed to have Travis Court extend eventually to Horsehaven, which the applicant's aware of that, and that would be completed as sometime as part of development. The houses that you see here are alley loaded, more of your higher density, medium dense type housing product. So with the R2, you'd be able to provide, or the applicant would be able to provide a compatible development with adjacent development. And on note, as you see here, these are smart code. There's a couple of duplexes at that location as well. So there's some duplexes in the area. Regards to future land use, you see here, it's all been designated for residential, so the R2 would meet that as well. Commercial and high density are to be located along higher street classifications, not the case here, so the proposed development would not utilize this for their medium density. That'd be more in your limited or neighborhood commercial or your lower residential. Would be assigned as they are further away from the urban centers, and R2 is on that lower spectrum of density. R2 zoning is typically assigned for properties with sufficient access to major transportation routes. They're not asking for industrial, so it's not applicable. Exhibit S8, overview of comprehensive plan policies for this. Zoning of land to be annexed must comply with the City of Post Falls comprehensive plan and other master plans. Went over the future land use map. It's consistent with the residential designation. The next one, orderly development. This is kind of a finger sticking in just off of a larger county pocket. So it's progressing and reducing the amount of infill in this area. So it would be considered orderly development, and you have utilities nearby. And then that answers the other criteria of trying to encourage infill, and so it would meet that policy as well. Routed to the agencies, as you see here, and Kootenai County Fire commented, neutral, it's within their boundary, and it would service from their East 16th location.
Any questions of John on this one?
I do have one quick question. That Travis Court, is that a city street?
And
That is going to go down to
Horsehaven.
the Horsehaven, but that Travis Court,
Yeah, as Smart Code was adopted, the alleys were city right-of-way. And so, once again, I may ask Jim to come up and speak to how, whether they want to continue that through this, or how they plan to attack this as part of development for actually how that
I thought that you mentioned that they were going to punch Travis Court down. to the
Yes,
Horse.
Travis Court is, we have a regulating plan for this area that requires Travis Court to extend to Horsehaven Avenue. And so we had discussions on that with the applicant of whether that was mandated or not. And we said for emergency services and how this area was conceived would be that Travis Court would extend to Horsehaven.
Yeah, because it looks like an alley,
It is.
Yes, it is.
You
It
wanna
is
add
an
anything?
alley.
Wide as a regular street, but the
but
street.
it has a name.
And it actually would probably get renamed to Travis Lane or something because it's dead ends. So there's other things with addressing and stuff that come into play too down the road. But
They'll have garages in the back, too.
Jim?
Jim Mulcahy. So Travis Court, with the Smart Code project, is considered an alley, but it is publicly owned and maintained.
And has a name.
And
like
that was because of the Smart Code designation at that time when that project went in.
there's two alleys that are city streets in Smart Code that are a 25-foot wide and improved 25, and then there's a 15-10, where you improve the center 15 and you have gravel shoulders. So there's two different cross sections in Smart Code for people to pick for public right-of-way in
Fire
Smart
truck
Code.
could get down there?
Yes.
That's
They could get there easier, I guess, if it's punched through a bit.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you.
all right.
Thanks, Jim. Does the applicant wish to speak on this one?
It will be kind of a goofy thing, but.
Name for the record, please.
Do you want to leave anything out?
Yeah, that's fine. City Council and Mr. Mayor, I'm Jack Johnston, representing this property. It's an embarrassingly small project compared to what's been discussed tonight, but it's simple too. We just finished two of the identical buildings 200 feet to our east, bordering the church parking lot there. and on lots that were about 4,000 square foot smaller per duplex than what we're proposing here. These are quarter-acre gross lots with one duplex on each one, limiting our density compared to the crossings we're adjacent to and share a border with. So I don't know if any of you have been down there recently and seen our two buildings that were just finalized in the last 2 weeks, but we're proud of what we built there. And these will be the same buildings, probably a different color, but with much larger lots and open space. Pretty simple. And Travis, as we will match up the existing specs on Travis Court and bring that to Horse Haven, whatever the pleasure of the city is on that. So,
Thanks. Are there any questions, Johnson? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jen, anyone wishing to testify?
We have none.
With that, I will close the public hearing. Council, how would you like to act on this one?
Move to approve the Haven North annexation file number ANNX-0004-2018.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Shannon, please take the roll.
Thorson.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item up on the agenda is unfinished business, and tonight we have none, followed by citizens issue. This section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council on a city-related item that is not on the agenda. If anyone wishes to testify, please come forward, give your name, and we'll allow you 5 minutes. Kim? Ward?
Mr. Timer.
I'm not used to this.
It's a lot of pressure.
My name is Kim Brown. I'm with the Post Falls Historical Society. 30 years ago, the city fathers were very supportive of the formation of the Historical Society. And wouldn't they be rooting tonight for the growth and development? 30 years ago, Post Falls was labeled as the fastest growing little town in Idaho, and now we're the 10th largest city. So you've clearly achieved your historic potential. What I'm offering you all tonight is to continue that vision with the support of keeping this vision of the city's growth and development and its history alive. 30 years ago, we had Mayor Kent Helmer, Councilman George Politis, former mayors Franny Wilhelm, Cecil Meyer, and Don Camps, who are all part of our charter members. 100 citizens, hardworking citizens. And they grabbed a bunch of us volunteers in town and said, hey, we can do better, and we really do have a history to our town. And of course, we were kind of little then. But we do have a large history. We have a rich history. So tonight, what I'm doing is going to offer you 3 options, or you can take one, or all 3. One is to write down your memories of Post Falls, whether you've grown up here, whether you've published a paper here. I know you've grown up here, Linda. So I am continually encouraging you all to write down your memories. Lynn, you have memories of the fire department. So there are a lot of these fun things that can be written down. Make copies for yourselves, give them to your institutions or your families, but leave them with the Post Falls Historical Society, this group that's been around for 30 years. We will keep them in our file because we consider them to be part of the story of the land and the people. Now, you might not think it's important, but I know that Old Man Ross is probably jumping up and down. His name was shared tonight over and over again. And so that's another thing that I would encourage you to do as we are developing, to not lose track of these historic names. One of our charter members was sitting in the audience tonight, Vonnie Satchwell. Okay. So whenever we are out developing, and the Schneidmiller name is still here, but we are always encouraging these old family farms. The Beck family, we're okay with the Beck family, they've got the road. But when we're doing these subdivisions and when we're trying to preserve history, please consider this with your planning and zoning department and share some of that information with some of the developers, because we don't want to lose these names. So the first thing I'm encouraging you to do is to fill in behind our charter members. When people die, the Historical Society and their families do not forget them. And that's what we work on with history. We don't want to forget your actions, and we certainly don't want to forget the faith that these city fathers had in our citizenry to keep a record and to enjoy the history of Post Falls. So what we're doing is backfilling behind those charter members. We need your membership to continue their dream. And their dream, of course, is a gift to the city and to our residents, the story of the land and the people that have lived here. Some people think it's just a big hot time in the old town tonight because we're going to be going up to 90 or 100,000 people. But think about it. We're not a ghost town. We're not Wallace. I mean, we've got a lot to be proud of. And the history of the town doesn't just stay with Frederick Post. Each of you are contributing. So we want to continue that story. We want to make our kids, we want them to know more about the story. So I'm encouraging you during Idaho Archaeology and History Month, write down a few of your memories, preserve them with your families, drop them off at the museum, 101 East 4th Street. Everyone has lived there. Mr. Chapin had his drugstore there. I chuckle when I think of Cliff Hayes and the police department there. Park and Rec, Dave Fair's been there. Everyone has lived there. Well, the museum is there now too. So we have been in good company, and we encourage you to visit. If you have those relatives rolling in during the summer and you don't know what to do with them, send them over to the museum. We are open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 4. If you have your kids that need entertainment, send them over. We're working with the Boys and Girls Club. The 3rd grade from Post Falls schools are coming this May. So please take advantage of your local museum. Join us. Continue the work of the charter members. Share your stories. And the last item is one that I know you will really perk up your ears at. We will be celebrating our 30th anniversary on June 28th. That's a Thursday evening, not Tuesday, so you're off the hook. I don't think any of your, none of your boards or anything are meeting. So it's Thursday night, the 28th of June. Gary Schneidmiller will be our featured speaker, and he will be sharing a great deal about the growth and development of Post Falls. He will be talking a lot about his parents, because you don't just start out successful. There's a lot of foundation building that has been laid here in Post Falls. So for that reason, we encourage you, and we do not forget the early support of the city of Post Falls, the city fathers, and these families that continue to develop their lands and open up this town for more people to enjoy. So keep those 3 things in mind. You know I'm going to come bother you about them. Join the society, visit the society, and come, for heaven's sakes, come to the 30th annual or the 30th anniversary party. And I just want to let your citizens know, this is not just for the bigwigs of Post Falls. This is open to all residents of Post Falls, and we cordially invite you and everyone to enjoy the history of our town.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate it. Thanks for your patience in staying through all the public hearings to announce
History
that.
never goes away, Ron.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Next item up, new business, Pheasants Landing subdivision. Oh, good, we get to hear from Mr. Manley now.
He's earning his $1.50 today.
All right, so Pheasants Landing. Case file, as you see there. Owner, JT Holdings LLC, with the applicant being Mike Carey, Big Capital Inc., out of Hayden, Idaho. So you're being requested to review and approve the proposed subdivision of approximately 10 acres, intending to create 29 lots within an R1 zoning district. This was recommended approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their April 10th meeting. Project location is as you see here on the east side of Chase Road, north of Fisher, and it would include an extension of Ashworth Lane to the west to Chase Road. So the current land use on this is single-family residential. It says vacant, but that's not correct. The physical characteristics would be single-family residential with some of those native grasslands, with water provided by East Green Acres and sewer being provided by the City of Post Falls. You look at here, you see the proposed layout of the extension of Ashworth Lane with a proposed connection to the north, meeting and providing potential connectivity in that direction. There, right here you see this lot 4. There was a discrepancy in a few exhibits. The intent is for lot 4 to be above the minimum of 6,500 square feet. There was a couple exhibits that had differing numbers there. So the average lot size you see there is 11,325, approximately 2.9 dwelling units per acre. There are 2 flag lots you see here along the northwest corner and southwest corner. This is where in the code it speaks to this as being allowed, but it needs to provide sufficient width for access and utilities to be provided, and that would be ensured prior to plat. So the review criteria in this proposal is to make sure that there's provisions for water supply systems in terms of quantity, quality, and the type of subdivision being proposed, and this would be coordinated through East Green Acres. The sewer being provided by the City of Post Falls, number 2, and there is capacity. Number 3, the proposed streets are consistent with the transportation elements of the comprehensive plan. These are local streets, and they are more or less governed by design standards within subdivisions within our code, but it would be compatible as designed. 4th criteria is there any soil or topographical issues for the site that would present a hazard or haven't been identified? And this isn't the case on this site. The 5th one is looking at zoning, and then is it allowed for the zoning district? And so when you look here, it's currently been approved for R1. This was a zone change that's recently been processed. The maps we have don't show that, but it is zoned R1 at this location, and as it's consistent with the R1 to the east. So it does meet the zoning criteria for the 5th item. And the 6th criteria deals with bearing no more than its fair share cost of the development, and this is handled through impact fees on projects like this at the time of development. Here were the agencies that were routed for this proposed subdivision. Kootenai County commented. Unlike the other ones that are going to be served off the East 16th this evening, this one is highlighted by the service off North Idaho. So,
Good old Idaho Street.
And then lastly, I'd like to state that this right here is the last last new business item for subdivisions based off our current code revisions. They are now going to go to P&Z and be reviewed there, and if for chance there's an item of discrepancy, it would be appealed to City Council as a whole new de novo, brand new public hearing before you guys for review. So just wanted to make that announcement.
Good. Thanks, John. Any questions, John, on this one? Seeing none. Thank you. Council. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I looked and I thought you were sleeping.
I did. I fell asleep.
Sorry, I'll go ahead.
All right, cool. Thanks.
There was an issue, but I'm assuming that since Mr. Fair is here to speak, will that be addressed, or has it been addressed?
I have not got confirmation. I do know that there was a statement on public record that the applicant does intend to coordinate mitigating some potential visual stuff with Dave Fair on that. I don't know. I haven't got confirmation of that at this point in time.
And the only other question, I think Mr. Fair brought it up in his letter too, was the narrowing of the street, and that's all okay?
In discussions with engineering, and I can have Jim come up here and speak to that, but I know that they've reviewed and considered their proposal.
So with the narrowing of the street is not the narrowing of the street. The street is the same width. It's the right-of-way that actually dipped in, but it's still, the road width is still accommodates for the whole subdivision as seen in the plans. It doesn't affect anything, but it just keeps the two homes to where they can utilize those in the future and don't have to tear them down. Because it falls within the planning distances as their setbacks.
Okay, that's all I had.
Good, and I appreciate you mentioning that mitigation on the headlights and that, because I did read that as well, so.
Councilor Wolf, that was added as a condition at the planning commission level. The condition reads, work with the owner of the home immediately across from the intersection of Ashworth and Chase to plant a landscape buffer or other screen to mitigate the impact of headlights from cars exiting Ashworth Lane onto Chase Road. So it's.
I also thought that you'd mentioned in your comments that we couldn't, like, enforce that.
Oh, it's enforceable. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, mitigate means a lot of things to different people, but we will certainly look for that as we get into development, making sure that there's been some level of mitigation effort to make sure that there's a screen going on there.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Sorry, are you done?
I'm done now.
Appreciate it. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Council, how would you like to act?
Move to approve Pheasants Landing subdivision file number SUBD-004-2018.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion? Shannon, please take the roll.
Wolf.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next, ordinances and resolutions. Tonight, we do have one resolution, and it's a resolution records custodian.
Move to approve the resolution records custodial.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Shannon, please take the roll.
Malloy.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Motion passes. Administrative staff reports, the Arts Committee update. Dave, are you presenting on that one?
I am.
Linda, please.
Dave's going to put the picture up for me.
It's a good thing it's a long meeting, because you ain't no man away.
Just a little bit of background here. Carrie Thorson, myself, the mayor's wife Susan, Dave Fair, Jamie Davis, Larry Karstison, we all sit on the Post Falls Arts Committee. And we were working on a couple of projects over the past year. We were going to do a Veterans Memorial, but that turned into sort of a really big project. So we decided that we'd start on something smaller. And I've been really partial to these eagles. There's some eagles that live down near the Spokane Street Bridge. And so since we did the fish in the northern planter, we have decided as a committee that we would like to do about the same size eagle in the southern planter down off Spokane Street and First Avenue. We have talked to engineering, and we have got a bid for the eagle itself. The bid is going to be right around $5,000 to $6,000. I did kind of go out on a little bit of a limb, thinking that you guys would approve this, and I put a $2,100 deposit down and ordered it. Well, Susan wanted the thing up by Post Falls Festival. I had to do something, so. Anyway, they are fabricating the bird now. And so Carrie and I are going to fundraise the rest of the money. That's our plan for the eagle. And then we're asking council's approval for the cost of the pole that it's going to be on. It needs to be engineered, and we'd like it to look like a tree branch. And it has to be fairly tall, and I know, do you know anything about this, Jim? I know Bill and Rob were working on it, but I don't know if you know anything about it or not.
I've heard that it's 10 feet tall, and that deals with the visibility issues. It has to be higher because we actually had to drop that planter during that project, the original project that was in there. So, yeah, that's about all I know.
Okay, so what we're asking the council for is since the urban renewal district is closed in August, and we're going to get a rebate back from a little bit of money from that, what we're asking is, would the council approve paying for the pole that the Eagle will stand on if we can raise the rest of the money to do the Eagle? So we're thinking it's going to be some sort of about an equal match. 6,000 for the Eagle, around 6,000 for the pole.
Council.
Is there going to be an RFQ or a bid brought in front of us so we can see a more exact-ish cost?
Actually, Shelley searched all over. She's on our committee too, and this is the only company she could find. We actually found two companies, but one of them was just astronomically higher than this company that she found.
For the pole.
For the pole.
Oh, for the pole, and we don't have any idea for the pole. No idea.
Probably would come under the approval limit of staff, would it not, for if it's $5 or $6 grand?
Depends on what that break point is, but it might, if it's right in that vicinity of where that break point is, it'd have to come out of someone's budget at that point.
And we can have them bring that information back to us, or
I think
give us a heads up.
Yeah, it's best to make decisions based on hard numbers, I believe, so.
I'm not understanding what you're
He
saying.
wants to know if we can, once you find out what the actual cost of that pole is, could you bring that back to us or at least notify us? I mean, so we know what we're approving.
Okay, and I think that Bill Melvin's going to find that out. He's dealing with the pole part.
The concept, the project's excellent. What I'm afraid of is say, yeah, go ahead and do it, and the pole ends up costing $15,000. Like, yeah. I mean,
Okay, well, anyway, that's,
How about the rest of council?
Well, I think it's a great idea, and I know that Linda and I can raise money, and we might not even need that.
just in case we do.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Any other comments?
Great idea, put me on the list,
Great
call for a
project. Fits
donation.
That area really, really well with the.
And we do need it says action item. We have to make a formal
It's an action
decision.
item.
So I would
It's just
ask
a motion.
for a motion. Probably not from Linda or Carrie, only because they are.
Well, thanks a
on-
lot.
Yeah.
would it be appropriate to move to postpone the item till the next meeting, assuming there will be a bid?
So, yeah, you can make a motion however you want to handle that. You can approve it tonight, you can make a motion and see if that carries to move it off to another meeting. That's the council's discretion.
You put some certain on it, too.
I don't know if I want to go that far, but say move to postpone this item until, what's the next council meeting?
2 weeks.
June,
June 5th.
2 weeks from
5th.
today, or June 5th, city council meeting to allow time for the presentation of a formal bid for the pool.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion.
What you're moving, because obviously the Eagle is already in motion.
Right, this is the pool, this is just the pool.
I'll just keep the Eagle on my deck.
In the form of discussion, is that going to delay this project if we put it off for 2 weeks?
No, it won't be
Formal.
here by then.
Okay.
Flew south
We're
for the
getting
summer.
the Eagle. Yeah, I'll keep it if I have to.
You're going to stand out there and hold it up?
Pay for it.
Okay, we have a motion, second, and all sorts of discussion. How about roll call?
Anthony.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Abstain.
Thorson.
Do I need to abstain?
no,
Not for a postponement.
no, I mean, you're not receiving a personal benefit from this, you're just on a
It'll make me
committee.
feel good, but it won't, yeah. So I will say aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you, and thank you for the work you've done on that committee. That's great. Next item up is a discussion on joint workshop with Urban Renewal, topic of the Highway 41 Tech Park.
Urban Renewal would like to schedule a joint workshop with you. They, most of the Urban Renewal commissioners can make June 28th. It'd be at 8 a.m. in the morning. If you could let me know possibly by Friday if you could attend. Not sure on location yet.
What is the date?
It's That's a Thursday,
June 28th.
June 28th.
Okay.
Didn't you already send out an email on this?
Yeah.
I had originally said the 26th, but they couldn't do the 26th.
I want to make sure it was June, because May
And
28th is
Joe, we
Memorial
understand.
Day.
Yeah, we understand, so we'll just keep you posted or have you give you a presentation.
Perfect.
So everybody, if you'll please let Shannon know.
No.
At what time did she say?
8 a.m.?
8 a.m.
8 a.m.
The 28th?
Okay.
So it says action item. Do we need a motion on that?
I have action item there in case we needed to do something.
Just do jazz hands, yeah.
If I don't have it there, you can't do anything.
Got it.
So June 28th.
I'll send a reminder email out.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Mayor comments tonight. Yeah, long meeting, set a record, most public hearings. And I just want to extend a thank you to planning and zoning, who seem to be having this many public hearings on a regular basis. So I appreciate what they do. Council comments?
Yes, I have one.
Good.
The Snowgate Committee has placed a survey on the city website. It's under the "We Want Your Feedback," so I believe we've gotten 80 replies already, so we're asking the citizens to go to the city website. It's under "We Want Your Feedback," and some questions regarding possible snow gates for the city, and information the council can consider during the budget process.
Thank you very much. Al?
I had the pleasure of attending my grandson's baseball game at Sportsman's Park this last weekend, and you guys did a fantastic job, Dave. So I just wanted to thank everybody that was involved with that. I know that the bigger field isn't done yet, but the smaller field was done, and I had the pleasure of listening to a lot of people comment about, wow, they really did a great job with this, you know? And so always like to hear that. Almost there.
Thanks, Al.
I've been watching them
Good job.
work.
Carrie?
I go past there multiple times a day. I would like to thank Councilor Wolf in advance. Linda, you probably didn't hear that, but he said he would like to donate towards the Eagle. So first one in.
Joe?
Quickly, as we see all these public hearings, there's a blast out to all the local neighboring agencies for feedback, and consistently, the only one that gives us any help is the fire department. So, Chief Merritt,
High five.
I really do appreciate that, even though most of them are neutral, but at least we know that it's been looked at, and any feedback we get is very helpful. So I do appreciate your participation in that. I know there's a lot of them, and thank you.
And I already passed on my comments, but I'm going to make one anyway. And I want to thank the folks that are here. This was a long meeting, 2.5 hours of council. We went an extra hour before that, but we appreciate you taking the time and coming. And you may not always hear what you want to hear. You may not always get the decision you want, but please know that we appreciate your input and we do listen. So thank you very much. We do not need an executive session. Come in. The next motion is?
Adjourned.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.